You know Sartre, you know Camus, they got their episodes. But there was someone else at that cafe table, someone who took existentialist philosophy further than either of them. Simone de Beauvoir, philosopher, feminist, author of one of the most important books of the 20th century. And for too long she has been introduced as Sartre's partner, not as the intellectual force she actually was. In 1949, she published The Second Sex, a 900-page work of feminist philosophy that asked a question neither Sartre nor Camus had thought to ask. If existence precedes essence, if we are not born with a nature but create ourselves through our choices, then what does that mean for women? What does it mean for someone who has been told, for centuries, what she is? Her answer launched second-wave feminism, reshaped feminist theory, and changed the conversation about gender equality forever. This is her story. Simone de Beauvoir was born in Paris in 1908 to a bourgeois Catholic family. Her father lost his fortune. Her mother wanted her to marry well. De Beauvoir wanted to think. She studied philosophy at the Sorbonne. At 21, she became the youngest person ever to pass the agrégation in philosophy, the most competitive teaching exam in France. The record had been held by a man. She broke it. At the Sorbonne, she met Jean-Paul Sartre. He was impressed, not romantically, intellectually. He recognized immediately that she was his equal. They formed a partnership that lasted 51 years. But here is what the history books often skip. De Beauvoir was not Sartre's disciple, she was his critic. She read everything he wrote before he published it, and she told him when he was wrong. This is Mindscape philosophy. We tell the stories the textbooks leave out, stories about ideas that actually change how you live. Today, the woman who asked the question existentialism forgot. In 1949, de Beauvoir published The Second Sex. The opening line is one of the most famous in feminist philosophy, but what she was doing was pure existentialism. Sartre said existence precedes essence. You are not born with a fixed nature, you create yourself through your choices. De Beauvoir looked at this and asked, then why are women told what they are? Throughout history, she argued, woman has been defined as the other. Man is the subject, the default human. Woman is defined in relation to him, his opposite, his complement, never herself. This is not biology, de Beauvoir argued. This is not nature. This is what society has done and continues to do. A woman is not born passive. She is taught to be passive. She distinguished between immanence and transcendence. Immanence is staying within the role assigned to you. Transcendence is breaking free, creating yourself, choosing your own meaning. This is existentialism applied to gender equality. Freedom is not just a philosophical concept. For women, it is a daily fight against the roles that have been imposed for centuries. Remember Sartre's concept of bad faith? Lying to yourself about your own freedom? De Beauvoir showed how bad faith operates differently for women. A woman in bad faith does not just pretend she has no choices. She pretends she is what society tells her to be. Feminine, nurturing, agreeable. She plays the role so completely she forgets she is playing it. And here is the cruelest part. If she rebels, if she asserts her freedom, she is punished, called difficult, called unfeminine, called a problem. The system does not just create the cage, it guards it. De Beauvoir did not just describe the problem, she lived the rebellion. She never married, she never had children. She wrote philosophy, taught, traveled, loved who she chose, and refused to apologize for any of it. In 1971, de Beauvoir did something that could have sent her to prison. She wrote and signed the Manifesto of the 343, a public declaration by 343 women who admitted to having had illegal abortions. At the time, abortion was illegal in France. Women were dying in back-alley procedures. The Manifesto was a deliberate act of civil disobedience and a direct application of existentialist ethics. De Beauvoir's argument was simple and devastating. Freedom means nothing if you cannot control your own body. Existence precedes essence, but a woman cannot choose her existence if the state controls her biology. The Manifesto helped change the law. In 1975, France legalized abortion. De Beauvoir used philosophy to change reality. This is feminist theory in action, not in a classroom, but in the world. Simone de Beauvoir died in 1986. 50,000 people attended Sartre's funeral in 1980. She walked at the front of the procession. When she died 6 years later, the crowds were just as large. Her influence on feminist philosophy is everywhere. When you hear that gender is a social construct, that biology is not destiny, that women should not have to choose between being respected and being liked, that is de Beauvoir. The second sex inspired generations of feminist thought. Betty Friedan read it and wrote, "The Feminine Mystique." Judith Butler built on it. Every conversation about what it means to be a woman in the world traces back in some way to 1949. But here is what most summaries of de Beauvoir miss. She was not just a feminist, she was an existentialist. Her feminism was built on the same foundation as Sartre's philosophy. She just took it somewhere he never went. The relationship between Sartre and de Beauvoir is often romanticized. The great love story of existentialism. The truth is more interesting and more honest. They never lived together. They never married. They had other relationships, sometimes shared ones. They read each other's work, criticized it, made it better. She called him her essential love, but not her only one. When Sartre died, de Beauvoir wrote a book about their life together. She called it Adieu, a farewell to Sartre. It is not sentimental, it is clear-eyed. She loved him, but she never stopped seeing him clearly. And when she died, she was buried beside him. But her legacy, her philosophy, her feminism, her vision of what freedom actually means for half the human race, stands entirely on its own. Let me bring this to today. You open your phone, you see a woman being criticized for being too ambitious, too loud, too much. That is de Beauvoir's Immanence, the cage that tells women to stay in their assigned role. You hear someone say, "Boys will be boys." That is existentialist philosophy failing. The idea that some people are born with a fixed nature while others get to choose theirs. Gender equality has come a long way since 1949. But de Beauvoir would say, the fact that we are still having these conversations proves her point. The other is still the other. The power of women is not about dominating men. It is about what de Beauvoir called transcendence, the freedom to define yourself, to create your own meaning, to exist as a subject rather than an object. And here is the question she leaves you with. Are you living your own life, or the life someone else assigned to you? That is existentialism. That is feminism. That is the question that changes everything. 3 practices. 1. The role check. Today, notice one moment when you are playing a role, being who you are supposed to be instead of who you are. Just notice. 2. The other check. Notice when you define someone, or yourself, in relation to someone else. His wife, her assistant, his +1. See people as subjects, not objects. 3. The transcendence moment. Do one thing today purely because you choose to, not because you should, not because it is expected, because you freely decided. That is freedom. De Beauvoir changed existentialism by asking who gets to be free. But there is another philosopher who asked an even more uncomfortable question. What if freedom itself is the problem? Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared God is dead, and meant that without a divine foundation, we have to create our own values. But what happens when everyone creates different values? What happens when freedom becomes chaos? That is next time on Mindscape Philosophy. Subscribe so you do not miss it. This is Mindscape Philosophy. Tomorrow morning, one choice, one moment of transcendence. See you next week.